Okay, are we ready? We'll start our meeting. Given the current shelter-in-place order covering the state of California and the social distance guidelines issued by the federal, state, and local authorities, the city is implementing changes to participate in council meetings. The council chambers will be open to the public, but we will implement social distancing policies and will limit the number of people who may be in the council chambers. The meeting will be webcast and accessed at our city website, as on the screen. Members of the public are encouraged to participate in the meeting by accessing the webcast at the URL that's on the screen, providing written comments at the same website, participate by phone, or coming to the city council meeting in person. We are practicing social distance and can only accommodate a maximum of 16 people at one time. I'll call the meeting to order, and the flag salute will be led by Councilmember Whalen.
Please join me in pledging allegiance to our flag and our republic. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Will the clerk call the roll, please?
Councilmember Ashbeck? Here. Councilmember Bessinger? Here. Councilmember Mwanatua? Here. Councilmember Whalen?
Here.
Mayor Flores?
And I'm here. First order of business is presentations and proclamations. I've asked Councilmember Bessinger to read our first proclamation.
It's my pleasure to read a City of Clovis proclamation for National Public Works Week 2021. Whereas public works services in our community are a vital and integral part of our citizens' everyday lives, and whereas the American Public Works Association has chosen Stronger Together as the theme for this year's National Public Works Week to highlight the quality of life public works provides to communities, and whereas the support of an understanding and informed citizenry is vital to the efficient operation of public works systems and programs, and whereas the health, safety, and quality of life of this community greatly depends upon public works facilities and services, and whereas the city is proud of its public infrastructure and the men and women who are dedicated to its design, construction, operation, maintenance, preservation, and improvement, and whereas the city seeks to raise the public's awareness of public works issues. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the City of Clovis does hereby proclaim the week of May 16th through 22nd, 2021 as National Public Works Week in the City of Clovis, and encourages all citizens and civic organizations to acquaint themselves with the issues involved in building and maintaining our public works, and to recognize the contributions which public works employees make every day to our health, safety, comfort, and quality of life. In witness thereof, the Mayor has set his hand and caused the official seal of the City of Clovis to be affixed this 17th day of May 2021.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. So I just wanted to show you the National Public Works Week, poster this year, Stronger Together. So, pretty cool little guy. Also, I wanted to thank you for, meaning to thank you for last year. When we started out in COVID, we actually were going to take the item consent, but you pulled it and you read it out loud, though we weren't here to represent the public utilities and the public works. It was awesome to see that pulled and being read out loud and recognized in that way, so thank you very much. On behalf of the American Public Works Association, the Public Utilities Department, General Services Department, Planning and Development Services, and our CPWEA, we would like to thank Council for proclaiming this week as National Public Works Week. APWA was established in 1960. It currently has over 30,000 members. This is the 61st annual National Public Works Week sponsored by the APWA, so this has been going strong and long for a while. This year's theme, Stronger Together, behind the scenes are the women and men of the public works who dedicate their lives daily to provide the foundation of services to keep the city of Clovis running. The silent partners here. Our public professionals, our public works professionals are instrumental in utilities, transportation, parks, solid waste, planning, building, and engineering. I'd like to have the CPWA members, the President, Steve Mejia, come up, and Vice President Davey Arizmendez come up. Just stand with me if you would. They are instrumental with us in the yard, getting everything done, representing the union out there and representing our team in Public Works. And without them, hand in hand, we wouldn't be able to accomplish what we do. Outstanding to work with. So thank you very much. In celebration of National Public Works Week, this is the best part, I'd like to invite the council to a barbecue on Wednesday. It's going to be under all the rules, and we're going to follow all the social distancing, masking requirements as we have to, but it's going to be semi-normal. So we will have our team there and tables set up, and we would love to see you there if you can make it. And it's going to be great food. It's going to be a great barbecue. So with that, I'd just like to thank you for recognizing Public Works, the American Public Works Association, and National Public Works Week. And hopefully next year, we can get back to even more normal and put our exhibits out at Farmers Market during the week with our trucks and loaders, and just really get involved again. I think hopefully this time next year we might be under a even more normal circumstance. But it is going to be really nice to have the barbecue again, which we missed out on last year, to the extent that we're going to do it this year and get people together and build the community within ourselves, as well as hopefully have everybody there that would like to attend. And Steve or David, would you like to any comment?
On behalf of CPWA, I just want to thank council, like Scott said, for recognizing this week. The Public Works employees have done a great job throughout this last year during these trying times of getting through their daily activities, their duties. Everybody was able to maintain their positions within the city, and I think that was a great job on the city's behalf, being able to keep everybody staffed. Stronger Together is a theme. We feel like the city's representatives and the affiliation have gained a stronger Stronger together. Yeah. I was going to say communication, but that wasn't the word I was looking for, and I got stuck with that word. Stronger relationship, I'm sorry. Through this year, we gained a stronger relationship, and Scott and myself have worked together to maintain that between the employees and the city's representatives. So thank you again, council, and we look forward to seeing you on Wednesday.
Thank you.
Thank you. We want to thank you all, because, you know, you're sometimes the unsung heroes, because the infrastructure that is needed to have a great city like we have is sometimes ignored. We need our water, we need our roads, we need our sewers. That's what really makes a great city, and sometimes people just don't understand that it's just not the police and fire. It's more. and you guys make the city run every day, and we appreciate the hard work you do. And you're the essential workers that you were here, no matter what happened last year with the COVID-19 pandemic. You were the essential workers that were right behind everybody to make sure that our city was still functioning, and we delivered the services, the essential services that needed to be done for our citizens. So thank you very much. We appreciate what you do. We have a proclamation here. We love your barbecue. That's the best part.
There are no rules. I usually hug, but that's a lot during COVID-19. Although I think he said right in front of me, got it. No, I'm kidding. Put up to the left.
That will make it. Thank you.
Can I just say one thing?
Just, I can't help but think about Harry today. He loved this barbecue. I think of all the days of the year. So I just had a flash of Harry, so I just wanted to say out loud that he loved all of you guys and really valued what you did, and hopefully we all have ascribed to that as well. But just a shout out to Harry and a piece of tri-tip for him on Wednesday, because he loved that barbecue. He got there as soon as it started. I think he stayed for the whole entire time, so we'll miss him this year.
Thank you. We move on to public comments. This is an opportunity for the members of the public to address the City Council on any matter within the City Council's jurisdiction that is not listed on the agenda. In order for everyone to be heard, please limit your comments to 5 minutes or less, or 10 minutes per topic. Anyone wishing to be placed on the agenda for a specific topic should contact the city manager's office and submit correspondence at least 10 days before the desired date of appearance. Anyone in the chamber wishing to make a public comment? Something not on the agenda. Anyone on the web?
None.
No correspondence?
Yes, we have one. I put a packet together for you. On page 1, we have a general public comment from a resident, Rachel Yodeman.
Okay. And it will be placed on the record.
Correct.
Thank you. Moving on. Ordinance and resolutions. With respect to the approval of the resolutions and ordinances, the reading of the title shall be deemed a motion to waive a reading of the complete resolution or ordinance, and unless there is a request by a council member that the resolution or ordinance be read in full, further reading of the resolution or ordinance shall be deemed waived by unanimous consent of the council. Consent calendar. Items considered routine in nature are to be placed upon the consent calendar. They will all be considered and voted upon in one vote as one item unless council members request individual consideration. A council member's vote in favor of the consent calendar is considered and recorded as separate affirmative vote in favor of each action listed. Motions in favor of adoption of the consent calendar are deemed to include a motion to waive the reading of any ordinance or resolution on the consent calendar. For adoption of the ordinances, only those that have received a unanimous vote upon introduction are considered consent items. Does any council member wish to remove anything from the consent calendar? Any item? Nope. Anybody from the public wishing to remove a consent item from the consent calendar? Seeing none. Anyone on the web?
No.
And we had nobody?
No.
I'll bring it back to council. What is your pleasure?
I'll make a motion for approval.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the consent calendar. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. We have the vote's unanimous, 5-0. Public hearings. A public hearing is an open consideration within a regular or special meeting of the City Council for which special notice has been given and may be required. When a public hearing is continued, noticing of the adjourned item is required as per Government Code 54955.1. This is item 11. Consider approval of the resolution revising the master development fee schedule and providing a description of fees to be requested for county adoption. Staff in this matter is Steve Smith, Supervising Civil Engineer.
Good evening, Council. I'm here to present to you tonight for your approval an update to the Development Impact Fee Program. This year, staff is recommending to implement year 3 of the Parks and Rec 3-year phase-in program, adjust the fire department fee based on current construction and land costs, and to include an adjustment based on the Construction Cost Index, also known as CCI. The overall impact of these adjustments will increase the impact fees for residential projects by 3 to 5%, depending on location and density. They will also increase the impact fees for non-residential projects by 2 to 3%, depending on location and land use, such as retail, office, or industrial. So first off, I want to focus on the parks fee for you. The parks fee was proposed to have an increase in the 1920 fiscal year. Staff in the development community reached a compromise at that time in which we agreed to phase in the increase over a 3-year period and include a CCI adjustment. This is the third and final year of that program, which will increase the rate to $4,766 per residential unit. The fire department fee is proposed to be increased as well, based on several factors. We've seen an increase in construction costs as part of the current project for Fire Station 6 that is under construction in the Loma Vista area. The next fire station is planned to be north of Shepherd, and we have adjusted the rate to in anticipation of land costs in that area. The result is an increase of about 15%, brings the rate to $1,568 per unit. The CCI adjustment is based on an average of the change in San Francisco and Los Angeles over the last year from December to December. The average results in a 1.8% increase in the rates, but I'd like to point out to you that we are also watching this very closely because we're seeing some large fluctuations. We don't want to be reactive to spikes, but we also want to plan wisely and be prepared for trends in the market. Now, I recognize these are really, really small charts, and I don't expect you to be able to read them. I just want to point them out to you that they are in your packet as attachment 2. And in there, you see a little bit more details as to the breakdown behind these summaries. They just serve to point out to you the average increases in the residential rates.
I do have a question, though.
Sure.
What is the public seeing over the internet? That?
They see both this on the screen, but they could also see on the agenda packet.
Okay,
Yeah, they could see the whole thing that you have in front of you as well.
Okay, thank you.
The public outreach that staff performed included an email to over 130 different stakeholders in the development community, some of which were BIA, Flood Control, Clovis Unified. The BIA requested a virtual meeting with us, and we were able to accommodate that, and they provided an email stating that they do not oppose the changes that we propose to you. And that email is also part of your packet, I believe is attachment 3. So just to summarize for you, we are requesting your consideration to approve the revisions to the fees tonight, and should you approve them, they will take effect 60 days on July 19th. If approved, staff will finish letters and emails to send to active projects to inform them of the pending updates so they're not caught unaware. And that's it from my presentation, but I'm available for any questions you might have.
Questions for Sean? Then,
Can you remind me, if this fee increase takes effect, does it impact projects currently in the pipeline or those that come after this, like the date they become effective forward?
It affects everybody that has not paid their fees.
Has not paid their fees?
Right.
Okay.
So according to the municipal code, whenever you pay your fees, you pay whatever the rate is in effect.
I see, okay, all right, thanks.
anyone else? Anyone in the public wishing to comment on these, please? Anyone on the web?
No.
No correspondence?
No.
Okay, I'll bring it back to council.
I'll move for approval.
Second. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor for approval, signify by saying aye.
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 Eager.
Yeah, go. You got a place to be, huh? So the motion carries for approval 5-0. Next item. Administrative items are a matter of the regular city council agenda. Other than public hearings, consider adoption ordinance 21-03, a request to amend Articles 1, 10, and 11 of Chapter 2.2 of Title 2 of the Clovis Municipal Code pertaining to the appointment of city clerk and city treasurer. We had a vote on this last time, and it was 4 ayes, no noes, and 1 absence. So we won't hear anything. We're just going to revote this because of the absence.
Correct.
Okay. So does any council member have any questions regarding this item for staff? Nope. Anyone in the public have a question regarding this item for staff? Anybody on the web?
No.
No correspondence?
No.
So I'll bring it back to the council.
Can I just ask a process question? I forgot to go back and read this item, so can I just abstain? It won't affect it. This is just a second reading.
That's
Won't
correct.
matter if I'm still an abstention?
That's correct.
Yeah, sorry about that. Thanks.
Okay, so
Motion to approve.
I'll second.
we have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And we have 4 ayes and 1 abstention. Thank you. Next one, item 13, consider introduction of a resolution 2021 and 22 City of Clovis Annual Budget, 5-year capital improvement program, and information regarding the Clovis successor agency and staff. I don't see Jay, so it's going to be Lute.
Yes, with the COVID situation, instead of getting musical chairs, I'll go ahead and do the introduction. Jay is here if there's any questions.
Oh, there you are.
But,
I didn't recognize the haircut.
So I'll go ahead and start it off, and if you have questions that I can't handle, I'll bring Jay up then. So it's my pleasure to introduce the budget for fiscal year 2021-22. The total budget is $295 million. $48 million of that's capital improvements. The other $247 million is operations. You can see the split between general fund and enterprise funds is exactly 50-50, which I don't think we've ever had that before. And then we have $70 million in internal services funds and $5 million in special revenue funds. The budget this year, I think we can categorize it as a recovery budget. As staff will recall, last year was anything but a normal situation at this time of year. This budget is kind of recovering from what we did last year, and I'll go into a little bit more detail on the COVID impacts, but it generally restores all the cuts and freezes that were made last year. It keeps our emergency reserve at 15%, $13.1 million. Under this budget, we would wind up with an unreserved general fund balance at the end of the year of $732,000. The budget does not include the American Rescue Plan funds, the ARP funds, that we are going to be getting this year and next year. We have a workshop scheduled later to talk more about those. It's $17.3 million. We did not include them in the budget because the guidance on how those funds could be spent had not been released when the budget was prepared and published. So they're not included in this budget. Later on, we'll be talking more about them and how we incorporate them and what we're going to do with those. So the last year, like I said, has been anything but normal. A year ago at this time, we made some significant changes to our budget. based on anticipated impacts of the pandemic. As it turns out, the revenue, while they decreased significantly, they decreased less than we anticipated. We got some stimulus funds to help make up for some of that lost revenue. We did not need to tap into our emergency reserve as we had been projecting a year ago. We made significant expenditure reductions based on the forecasted revenue reductions. When the revenue did not fall as much as possible, we wound up with a pretty significant fund balance for the end of this fiscal year. Again, the ARP funds are not incorporated into this budget. And we still have some concern going forward for a secondary economic dip based on supply side disruptions. If you look at what's happening with car dealers, bicycles, everybody's having problems getting product now. So we're monitoring very closely. Things are getting better, but we certainly aren't out of this yet. So the budget is kind of prepared with that in mind. So general fund highlights, we are restoring 6 sworn police officers. Those positions were vacant a year ago and were frozen due to the pandemic. We're restoring 3 frozen firefighter positions and adding 6 new for a total of 9 new firefighters to staff Fire Station 6, and including operating funds to start operating that facility, which we expect to come online early in calendar year 2022. We included operating funds and debt service for the senior center that's under construction. We are also working on Fire Station 2 replacement. This is just another surprise that 2020 brought us. We did not anticipate having to replace this station at this time. We knew it was eventually going to need replacement, but we had some structural failures there. So we are actually at work on building a temporary quarters to relocate the crew out to the fire training center. They will operate out of there while we tear down and rebuild Fire Station 2 at its current location. And then once the new station's built, they'll move back into the new station, and the temporary quarters, it's being built so that it can be used as a classroom at the training center. So we're working on that, and funds are included in the budget for that. And then we're having a significant investment in public safety vehicles. Going back clear to the last recession, we had kind of cannibalized the fleet fund. The fleet replacement fund had been kind of going on a pay-as-you-go basis, and we had deferred a lot of vehicle purchases. And we're doing some significant investments to try to catch up on those vehicles. Altogether, counting general fund and enterprise funds, we have 24 new or restored positions citywide. One thing we did this year in the budget is we had a lot of positions that were shown in the budget book but weren't funded, and it was getting kind of confusing. So we kind of cleaned all that up this year. So we're basically having 24 more positions than we had a year ago in the budget. And the tables in the personnel section of the budget kind of reflect. It shows what was shown in the budget, but what was funded, so that you can see a real comparison as to what we're adding. We are in the process of evaluating options to upgrade our finance and utility record keeping and data processing system. That's a very significant project. It's really our entire finance system and billing system. So we're evaluating that. That's included in the budget. We have included some technology upgrades and replacements in the police department, some data storage, some additional camera work because the cameras are getting, reaching the end of their lifespan, a different record management system, and some new mobile digital communication systems for the police department. We also included in the budget replacement of the fire department self-contained breathing apparatus. Those tanks and equipment are more than 13 years old, and they have a lifespan of 15, so we have to get the process going to make sure that they get replaced so that we have usable equipment on our vehicles. And then continued economic development. Again, that's always been a focus of Clovis. I think we try to be very business friendly, and we have some continued efforts there, especially as we come out of this pandemic, to see what's going to be different, because we're going to come out of it different than we went in, and we need to make sure that we can adapt to it and help our businesses flourish as they recover. Capital improvements, Fire Station 6 is currently under construction. Fire Station 2 is in the design phase. We are doing a kind of a parallel design on the temporary quarters and the permanent replacement. The Landmark Square project is under construction. We have started the design of the Loma Vista Village Green, and then significant street improvement and maintenance and repair projects, including $2.3 million in SB1 funds. So in summary, it's a recovery budget. We're restoring all the cuts and freezes from last year. We're also expanding services, most notably, preparing to open up a new fire station and a new senior center. The budget is balanced using projected revenues and carryover, the fund balance from the current year. It is important to note that if you look at the budget, the actual expenditures exceed the revenues for the year. Operating expenditures exceed operating revenues, and we're counting on that large fund balance to carry us through. But part of that is because we knew we were getting ARP funds. We don't know exactly how they're going to be spent, but the ARP funds are not included in here. So when those get rolled in as replacement revenue which is one of the things we'll be talking about later, it's not necessarily a bad situation. Long term, you always look at that. If your one-year expenses are going to exceed your one-year revenues, it's a kind of a red flag. But we're aware of it, and there's a reason we're doing it, and we'll go more into that when we start talking about the ARP. But it's also, we had a very large fund balance, and it is very prudent to spend that down and to use that. And a lot of it's being spent on one-time things, vehicle replacement, fire station 2, those type of things. So a lot of that one-time money most of that one-time money is being spent on one-time things. So that's where we're at. Summary-wise, the next step will be we will have the departmental presentations on June 14th, and then the adoption on June 14th. That concludes my presentation. I'm open for any questions.
Questions for Luke? No. I have a question. You said clean up positions. Does it mean eliminate them from the books that way and then start from scratch?
Yeah, so we had positions that had one time been filled, and then for whatever reason operationally they were no longer filled, but they were kept on the books as a position, but it just wasn't funded. And it was hard to follow. You had to know exactly, did we have a deputy chief? Was it a vacancy that we're recruiting or what? So we went through this year and cleaned all those up and got rid of those positions that we didn't intend to fill this year and weren't funding this year. So, if you look at in the budget book, it looks like, we're not really adding that many positions. Well, really we are, because a bunch of those positions were ghost positions that weren't really ever filled or haven't been filled for a couple of years and weren't funded. So the count now is actually truly what is funded and what we intend to fill.
But for the record, we're not cutting positions, we're just doing some housekeeping.
Correct. The total is 24 additional positions, even though some of those, there's positions that are going away, but we are adding positions. We're not cutting any filled positions. We're not cutting any people, and we're not cutting anything that's been funded in the past.
Okay. And as far as the ARP funds, we're waiting for more direction, then we'll decide what to do with it.
We finally got the direction. We have a workshop scheduled. I think it might be the next item. We have a workshop on the interim final rule. Let that name sink in, or the interim final guidance. Apparently there is. We got that a week ago. So we didn't have that when the budget was prepared or the staff report was prepared. So we didn't include those funds in the budget. We had an idea of what we were going to be able to do with them. We got the guidance last Monday. Following this item, we'll have a workshop and discuss what that guidance says we can do and what staff's recommending, and get some feedback from council as to where you want us to go with those funds.
Okay. Anybody from the public here in the chamber wishing to comment on this item or ask questions regarding the item? Anybody on the web?
No.
No correspondence?
No.
Bring it back to the council? Oh, well, you need a motion to continue to the June 14th?
I believe so, yeah. This is just the introduction, and the budget will be adopted on June 14th.
So I'll entertain that motion.
So moved.
Second. So we have a motion, continue this item till June 14th of this year. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. So motion carries 5-0. Next item, workshop for the Clovis City Council to conduct a workshop to discuss the impacts on ongoing city operations during the COVID-19 state of emergency as declared by the federal government, State of California, County of Fresno, and City of Clovis, and to explore actions the city may take in response to the crisis. Item 14, workshop update on the American Rescue Plan Act.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As promised, the American Rescue Plan Act was adopted in January. It was actually introduced in the middle of January and written in December. That's important to keep in mind as we're going through this, is that when this act was drafted and introduced, we were really at the peak of the pandemic, with infections and hospitalizations and deaths, at or near their peak. So it was a $1.9 trillion act that included money for responding to the ongoing medical emergency, and it also included stimulus for a variety of sectors. Some were distributed at the federal level, some at the state level, very targeted, certain industries were targeted, certain things were targeted. Included out of that 1.9 trillion was 155 billion for local government throughout the country. The distribution of those funds is based on the CDBG formula, which weighs a number of socioeconomic factors. Clovis is going to receive $17.3 million from this act. Now we will get we'll get half of it this year and then half of it in a year. The funds must be obligated by December 31st of 2024, and they must be expended by December 31st of 2026. The Treasury Guidance was issued, as I said, last Monday. Again, it is called the Interim Final Rule, and that kind of, it's an odd name, but it's one of those things that we also suspect that there's going to be some refinement, probably not revision, but refinement as we go through this over the next 4 years. And keeping in mind that we don't ever want to get caught doing something very creative that then doesn't stand up to an audit and have to pay it back. So keeping in mind this interim final rule, we've been looking at it with kind of that perspective. The purpose and allowable expenditures are to respond to the public health emergency or its negative economic impacts, premium pay for essential workers, replace revenue losses due to the pandemic, and then you can spend it on water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure. And those are the items that were identified in the Act for local government expenditures. The Treasury Guidance has provided us a little bit more details on the specifics. And I will go through each one of those four in a little bit more detail, but before I do that, the Act also has disallowed certain expenditures. Number one, none of this money can be deposited into a pension fund, and also it can't be used by states and territories to offset a tax. They can't say, well, we're getting this, so we're going to lower income tax, or we're going to lower state taxes. It can't be used for those purposes. That really doesn't pertain to us. So going back to the four prime ones, the first one was to respond to the public health emergency or its economic impacts. Keep in mind that when this was written, the pandemic was at its peak. So it's limited to costs that are incurred after March 3rd. We can't go back and say, oh, a year ago we bought 2 crates worth of N95 masks and charge that. It's only costs incurred after March 3rd. And it's only direct costs in responding to the pandemic. We have relatively little direct costs responding to the pandemic because that's just not what we do. We're not a health agency. We're not a healthcare provider. We do have some emergency calls that are related to the pandemic, but at this stage, especially after March 3rd, the pandemic's reached a stage that's a very small portion of what we're doing right now. There is the potential, we could, if we wanted, to implement some new program to respond to the pandemic, like a program to promote vaccines or something like that. But right now, we don't have a lot of direct pandemic response. So response to economic impacts, that's included as part of the first one, too. So we have the potential to direct assistance to households, small businesses, nonprofits, and impacted industries. If we choose to do that and to distribute this money, it would require significant administrative time to develop the programs, and then to figure out how we're going to do this in some equitable fashion to process applications. So, you know, that's there. It would also require significant evaluation to make sure we're not overlapping. For instance, the bill had so many billion dollars directed specifically to restaurants because they knew that was a heavily impacted industry. We would want to make sure we're not overlapping a federal one or a state program. The other thing that the guidance indicates is included is a response to the economic impacts is the salary and benefits to hire back or to fill positions that were eliminated or frozen during the public health emergency. So under this act, the frozen positions, as we bring those people on, we could pay all salary and benefits for the 4 years out of this act money for those people. We didn't lay off any people, but we did freeze positions. We froze 6 police officer positions. We did lay off all of our senior center staff and rec center staff. So if we fill those positions or bring them back, we could be able to charge their salary and benefits to these funds. Because, again, the senior center and rec center, the part-time staff was laid off because those programs were shut down. But we froze quite a few, I think a total of 15 general fund positions, 6 police officers, we froze some fire positions. Yes. We think, under the interim final guidance, we think it would. So, but again, we do want to be cautious. We want to approach this cautiously because if a refinement comes along later and says, no, they actually have had to have been given, you have to have given somebody a pink slip, we don't want to be caught spending that money, you know, that we have to pay it back. So, so the other thing it identifies is premium pay for essential workers. It identifies specific industries and job types that were determined to be essential and continue to operate during the pandemic. It includes government workers. The Act itself targets lower paying occupations. It specifically says that, you know, focused effort should be on the lower paying professions. If this premium pay plus the person's regular pay exceeds 150% of the county or state mean annual wages, you would need additional justification. Many of the people that, I mean, our most essential people, police and fire that were here, they would probably fall in that category. They don't tell us what the additional justification would be necessary, but the Act does, or the interim final guidance does say that it needs to be you need additional justification if you are paying it to people that make that much above the median or the mean wage. This might be something that council wishes to explore. If so, my recommendation would be that this would be an item that our current contracts are up next year, that this would be something to discuss during contract negotiations and not to make anything right now on that. Offsetting lost revenue. There's some very specific guidance in the Act as how you calculate that. And then you're required to recalculate it starting December, as how much revenue did you lose as of December 31st of 2020, and then you recalculate it in 2021, 22, and 23. And you also check in quarterly as well. We have looked at that. The lost revenue that we lost as of December 31st, 2020 was $2.9 million. The projections for lost revenue using these formulas through the life of this funds, it depends on what happens with the economy between now and then. And I just have a couple of examples here. If the economy grows at 6%, then our lost revenue and our revenues grow at that rate. Our lost revenues would come out to about $12.6 million based on our pre-pandemic situation. If the economy grows at 3%, then our lost revenue would equal $27.4 million. So it really depends on what happens between now and 2024, and that's why we have to check in and recalculate this each year. And then the fourth category is infrastructure. It is limited to water, sewer, and broadband. The water and sewer, any water or sewer project has to be consistent with EPA revolving fund criteria, the Clean Water Revolving Fund or the Safe Drinking Water Revolving Fund. Basically, it means it has to fix a problem for current users. It's not to expand capacity for new growth. It can only be used to fix a problem for current users. We do have some of those. We also have other means to pay for those as well. And then it can also be used for broadband. There are some speed requirements. It has to be able to support 100 millibits per second, or megabytes per second download speed, and a minimum of 20 upgradable to 100 upload. But it's only for the infrastructure, and it's probably likely that most of that infrastructure is already in place with Comcast throughout Clovis. And then there's also, again, going back to that, we want to make sure we don't have overlap. There's also some FCC funds being devoted to infrastructure improvement on broadband. So, I mean, it's something we could look at, but there's probably not a lot of demand or places that we could spend that money, this money, in that field right now. So considerations. When staff looked at this, again, we got these guidance documents a week ago. Just the loss in general fund revenue is potentially more than our entire ARP calculation. If we grow at 3%, our lost revenue as calculated under the Act is going to be $27 million, and we're getting $17 million. It could be less if the economy really takes off. It could be less than that, but even at a 6% growth, just our lost revenue is going to be 73% of our total ARP funding. Hiring staff to fill positions that were cut or frozen can also be used as an allowable expenditure. Any other expenditure we do now, whether it's premium pay, whether it's an outreach program, if we do that now, it could result in a shortfall later. Because again, like I said, we're estimating going forward, and if it could be, you know, somewhere between 13 and 27 million in lost revenue, and we've got 17 million total. If we spend some money now and then the economy doesn't pick up very fast, then later on it'll be too late to recoup that. So based on that, what staff is recommending, now this is a workshop, so we're not asking for action, just general feedback, is that we utilize the ARP funds for now to replace lost revenue. So we have 2.9 million as of the first of the year. We haven't even calculated anything for this year yet. Continue to watch that, continue to evaluate our revenue losses as per the calculations provided in the guidance, and update our projections annually. If we see that, you know, our revenue losses are going to be significantly less than what the ARP funds are allocation to Clovis, then we would be looking at coming back with some different programs or different ways to spend this. But that's our staff's recommendation at this time. We're looking for some guidance from council. Are you wanting us to do, to kind of take this course, or are you wanting us to look at different types of programs? We haven't had time to put together a lot of options, but that was the purpose of this workshop, is to get some feedback as to what you want us to look at, and then bring back on in possibly a budget amendment or something like that. So, and then keeping in mind too, that anything we do, again, going back, it needs to make sure that it fits the definition 4 years of now, 4 years from now, of whatever they determine and refine the interim final guidance. So that's our recommendations. We're available for any questions, comments, and Jay is here and Andy's here, and we can answer anything you have for us.
Sure.
Would this be the safest course, doing it like this, so that if we were to do positions that we froze, and then 2 years from now they changed rules, we may end up paying it back? This is the safest use of this money, probably the less, not going to move the goalposts on us on this?
Correct. The lost revenue, since they were so specific in their formulas, that is very safe. It's we are following it verbatim. We are demonstrating this much lost revenue. Now, keep in mind, it also gives us flexibility, because if we use this to replace lost revenue, it's really audit-proof. It's exactly what they said it was for. But we can use it to hire back people. We can use it for other programs. But for the accounting purposes, this is what we would be doing, is we would be using that and then monitoring to see what happens, because there is going to be a financial impact. And what we don't want to do is commit to a program now. That means that, well, we spent the money on something else now, and then let's say the economy doesn't bounce back, and in 2023, we're looking at cuts to services because the revenue just never caught up. And it's like, boy, we sure could have used that to keep our services for our people. Or to commit to something that after the rules get refined, we find out, well, now that's no longer allowed, so we need to divert money to pay that back. So.
And over the years, we've received settlements for contamination of groundwater. We could use some of these funds to rehabilitate the wells, if that's what I'm reading correctly. Even though we've received money for that, would that potentially be an issue since we've received a settlement for that, or would we be free to use that?
Again, according to the interim final rule, I think we could use that to fix an existing well problem, although we do already have another funding source for that project. Whereas, and reason that my recommendation, at least at this time, is that we just kind of keep it as lost, cover our lost revenue first is, yes, I could use this to put a carbon filter on a TCP well, but I also have TCP funds for that.
Right.
If I use this money for that now, and in 2023, our revenue just has not caught up, and we're talking about layoffs or something like that, we're going to be thinking to ourselves, oh man, wish we hadn't spent that money on that TCP carbon filter. So that's that's why I'm recommending this course of action at this time.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Bob?
Thank you, Mayor. So Luke, I want you to help me walk through the issue of the accounting of kind of the making up for lost revenue. When that first tranche comes in, I guess it's going to be like 8.5 or 9 million. When that first tranche comes in, is it just simply accounted as a revenue source then in our budget? It doesn't necessarily have to be spent. Is that right?
Correct. We just have to show over time how we're spending that. We're going to get my understanding of it, and Jay, please step up here or step up to the other microphone if I'm wrong about this, is they're going to transfer $8.65 million to Clovis. And then quarterly, we submit reports, and annually we calculate our lost revenue, and we say, we basically have to provide documentation on what we're spending that on. Are we spending it to replace lost revenue? That counts as an expenditure. So as of last December 31st, we had lost 2.9 million. So we could say 2.9 of that's just going right back into the general fund to replace that lost general fund revenue. If we decided, we wanted to spend it on an infrastructure project, we would say this money is being spent there, and it's just an accounting purposes from here forward. The money gets here, and then we have to show that we spent it according to the rules.
So we had expectations of a certain amount of revenue coming in, and our ability to either build up or maintain our emergency reserves. So if we did not receive that revenue because of the lost revenue, could we account then and count it as an expenditure that the funds went into our emergency reserves?
Okay, so putting it directly into the reserves wouldn't be the expenditure.
Okay.
Taking it in as just lost revenue is showing how we're spending our ARP funds. Once we do that, it gets blended with all the rest of our general fund money, and wherever we put it, whether we put it into, hiring bodies, transfers at the year end into the reserve or into the fleet fund, or the qualifying expenditure or qualifying use of these funds is counting it as lost revenue. Once it's in the general fund, then it's flexible. It's just mixed with our.
Okay, so we don't have to keep it segregated, but when we say, okay, well, this is what it was spent for, and we have to keep that separate from all of our other general fund expenditures. It's just, we're going to say, okay, well, this is lost revenue, and so we're throwing it into the general fund, and then as a result of it being put into the general fund, that's the accounting that is necessary. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay, thank you, that's helpful.
And let me turn around and look at Jay and make sure I get a nod from him.
He was nodding.
Okay.
Ron?
I feel much better when Jay's nodding. Tell me if he starts shaking his head. I'll shut up right then. Yeah. If you see him going. Yeah. There.
So I'm trying to understand it. So it's what we projected, but we did not meet. That's how that number is kind of generated?
Well, not even that. It's not what we projected. There's a formula based on how much did we make in the last fiscal year before the impact. So that would have been 18-19. How much did we grow the 3-year period, an average growth, either a formula they give you, a 4.1% growth, or if you grew more than that based on the 3-year average preceding or including the last whole fiscal year, then that's what you use as your projection, and then any revenues that fall short of that is lost revenue. So it's a methodology that's in the guidance, and it's very specific, and we've run through it, and based on that is where we came up with the numbers of 2.9 million already as of last December 31st, and depending on what happens, 12, 14 million, 27 million in lost revenue for the duration of this for the next 4 years.
And we don't have to commit and then be held to that commitment in the 3 years. So we can say lost revenue, but next year, say there's no lost revenue, we can shift it to something else, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
And that was kind of my recommendation is for now, let's just say we're not going to do anything yet until we see that if the economy takes off and our revenues, we don't have the lost revenue, then we can start looking at alternate programs. But until we get to that point, let's play the prudent way and make sure we keep that money in our general fund.
Now, for infrastructure, is it dollars already spent or dollars committed?
It has to be dollars spent after March 3rd.
After March 3rd?
Yes, after March 3rd of this year. It can only go toward expenses that occur after March 3rd. And it would be for a new project, something that, we would go out and put it into a new water project or sewer project or broadband. It's very limited to those types of infrastructure.
Okay, all right. And then, so there's no reimbursements for potential projects prior to March 3rd during COVID period? There's no?
No.
Okay.
No.
And then with regards to premium pay, any reimbursement or where it could be lost revenue for expenditures for COVID pay that we have already expended?
It can't be spent on anything prior to March 3rd. Premium pay is just, there's different terms for it. Some places use hero pay, where, and again, the guidance is it's got a strong equity component, and jurisdictions are encouraged to concentrate on lower income, and it's because of the fact that during the pandemic you had, people, whether they were food service workers or ag workers or grocery clerks that may be making fairly low wages, continued to work day in, day out, that they can get a lump sum up to, you can give them a lump sum. You can pay them up to, I think it's $13 an hour extra from now forward until you run out of money. There's a number of ways you can do it, but that's a premium pay for essential workers that were and are continuing to work. You can't get it if you're working from home. If you're working from home, you can't get it. And you can't say, I'm going to give you $13 per hour retroactive, because that can only start on March 3rd, but you can say, I'm going to give you $5,000. You can give a lump sum that's not tied to past work. It's tied to the fact that you're an essential worker that is making, getting this premium pay because you're having to report to work. Again, if that puts an employee over a certain threshold, additional justification is required, because again, the strong equity component of this act, and we don't know what that justification is going to be. We can write up a justification and find out, now if that doesn't cut it, and then you could be in a position where that's a disallowed use of that money, and now you got to scramble, and if you find out too late, well, then you could have to pay that money back.
Well, I would like us to look at that population of our staff that actually fit this, where we can kind of look at to see how much premium pay they can get. Because if they're already sort of in that lower threshold and stuff, I just want to know how much, that's all. If we can look into that. If it's not a whole lot, I think it is very worthwhile to help our sort of entry-level staff, I would assume that's what this is geared towards.
Yeah, I will tell you that
Right.
most of our staff would be above the threshold. We have
Okay.
some entry level that would be. It would also be problematic or a challenge to say we're gonna give essential worker pay to this worker, and I, you know, that is an entry, you know, he was mowing lawns during the pandemic, and we're not gonna give it to the policemen and firemen that were running emergencies on COVID calls during the, so we have to look at that. And we could wind up with, depending on what the justification rules are required, where, you know, these funds could be charged to the ARP, paid to here may not meet the justification and couldn't be charged to the ARP.
Well, I still
Okay.
would like some analysis of either way, meaning if it's across the board, this is what it may potentially look like, or if it's just, here's the essential, you know, starter, and it'll just be a couple $100,000. I think sometimes maybe it may or may not be worth it.
So we have approximately 600 employees.
Yeah.
So for every $1,000 in premium pay, it would be 600,000.
Okay. And then, let me see. So for the funds that we shifted for CDBG and all that, there's no way to reallocate back to help those programs back to where it was? Because we did vote up here to reallocate those. There's no way to help those programs back at all with?
Let me get Andy up here.
Yeah.
He's the CDBG expert. Not directly, there isn't,
Okay.
because that occurred before March 3rd.
So that's the key date. Okay.
Yeah, the CDBG funds that were allocated as part of the original CARES Act were explicitly supposed to be spent on COVID-related expenditures. Those were. So even if we could go back, we couldn't supplant those for another project. There was a very small amount that we shifted over, but we were able to recoup most of that when we got an additional allocation of CARES Act funding.
Okay. Thank you, Lynn.
Lynn?
Just quickly, the second item that you said, I was trying to write them down, public health impacts, premium pay, what was the, maybe the third, what was the third one?
So first is direct response to
Yeah.
the public health emergency.
Yeah,
Then response to the economic impact.
oh, okay.
Then premium pay.
It was that one, it was the 1B.
Yes.
Is there anything in there in the housing category? Direct assistance to, not households, but housing, anything in that category that might fit under there? Could this help us in some way?
Yes, we could do it to households, to nonprofits, impacted industries. Again, we'd have to look real strong to make sure that it's not overlap, because
Yeah.
there's been a significant amount of housing assistance, rental assistance, that's come to the county, that the county's administrating, that, you know, that we're working with them on. And we'd want to make sure there's not overlap, that we're not dedicating funds to a program that's already funded from another source. And there's also even, funds, I think, directly at the federal level for some of this stuff.
I think I was thinking more like fee offsets to affordable housing developments, that for folks that were impacted in COVID-19, you could make a circle there. I don't know, I was going to fee
I think
offsets.
there's a way to get there, possibly not directly. And that's somewhat of the flexibility advantage of just calling it lost revenue, is then it comes into the general fund, and then, okay, we could put general fund money into fee offsets if we wanted. But what we have spent our ARP money on lost revenue, which is exactly as they've laid it out, and we're sure they're never going to come back and disallow that use. So there's a way to get there.
Okay, that's all.
And there's probably a way to get there here. It would just take a lot more work on our part to determine exactly what it is.
Okay, look, on the construction side, so we've analyzed sewer and water. There's no need that we have that is city-borne, that we're not gonna be able to make up through development or anything, any other way, or grants, or something that we actually need that we're considering or studying?
We did look at specifically some water projects that would qualify. Most of our, all of our sewer projects really are growth-driven. And those would not meet the EPA revolving fund criteria for growth-driven. On the water, there are...
Does maintenance or upgrading, does that qualify?
Some upgrading can, if you're trying to fix a problem. For instance, you know, we looked at, we've got some treatment process improvements that we could make that would improve the quality of the water coming out of our plant. Now, we'd have to, again, we've only had 7 days to look at these rules, dig deep to see, okay, do they really meet the criteria for the Safe Drinking Water Revolving Fund? They probably meet the criteria, my guess. If we put in for a EPA grant, we wouldn't get it because we don't compete well in grants. But they probably meet the criteria. There are some things that we could put that money toward. But there's other funding sources and plans already for funding that through the enterprise fund and the user fees. But once we commit this money there, then if we have a shortfall in the general fund 3 years from now, we can't get that money back.
Okay. And on the broadband, you mentioned something about Comcast. So how are we handling? Is there any need that Clovis has on that broadband infrastructure?
So I don't think so, because it's just to provide infrastructure to unserved areas. And Clovis really doesn't have an unserved area where there's not the infrastructure. There may be households that don't have the broadband, but the infrastructure is likely there. And then for broadband providers, I think there's some FCC funds included in this ARP that's direct from the FCC to broadband providers to try to get broadband into areas that are not served.
Because with all the Zooming that everybody was doing and all the education that was done from home, what was unveiled was that fact that there's that great digital divide, especially in the poor sections of many cities. Did we get complaints of that in Clovis? And was there a gap anywhere in Clovis that we could identify and use some of this?
I don't know that we got significant complaints on that. I would imagine the school district probably has a better pulse on that. But again, the digital divide was not necessarily due to lack of infrastructure. And
it's more of a poverty issue versus infrastructure.
Yes, it's paying the monthly bills, being able to afford the service. And there may be a way, again, after only 7 days of looking at the interim final rule, there may be a way to use some of this money, not necessarily through the infrastructure, but if you wanted to use it through the this category, responding, direct assistance to a household, responding to the economic impacts, that you could use it on this category saying, well, these people couldn't afford their broadband, which is an economic impact because they've got kids in school, and we could do it through this channel. Again, though, we would have to, that's going to take a significant amount of work for us to put together an application process, to vet the applications, to make sure that we're not duplicating somebody else's efforts and funding, so.
It's more infrastructure, not...
Right. Category 4 is infrastructure.
It's not overcoming poverty, can it get to them?
Correct.
Okay. Any other? Go ahead.
Lou, can this also have we already put filtration in all of our facilities? I know we kind of mentioned it in the past, but have we completed all that?
Yes, we completed that very early on.
All of our facilities have the whatever.
Yes, the needlepoint.
Yeah.
Bipolar ionization system.
And then, can this? I've always been interested in just our technology and IT. Can this also, because of working at home and all the threats, and we've just seen recently of how a pipeline can be stopped because someone got in, and so can this also be a time for us to assess to see if we can use it there too, so that way PD to sewer, water, everything is just, well, we're very comfortable going, okay, there's a threat, this is how quickly we'll recover, this is how quickly we have everything stored, we have all the hardware.
So there's some discussion about the ability to use this for some technological improvements on the infrastructure side. Again, though, only something that we did after March 3rd. We can't go back and say, oh, we did this in December. It has to be after March 3rd. Plus, Jesse and his group does a pretty good job monitoring the situation, and again, we have user fee driven funds to pay for those user services. And whereas if we just take this as general fund revenue loss, then we could do that with it, just like we could spend.
We can still do that.
Yeah, but
More flexible with it, in other words.
Yeah, correct. But once we say it's going here, then if in 2023 the economy is having a huge secondary dip because of supply side disruptions, we can't get that money back to spend it to keep police officers on the street or keep the fire stations open or anything like that.
All of it's open to the public. Anybody from the public present here today wishing to comment on this item? No? Anyone on the web?
No.
No correspondence?
Correct, no.
And this is for direction only?
Yes, we're just seeking feedback. We want to look at some of the costs associated with premium pay is something I've heard. We want to kind of look at some of the other options. But.
Yeah, so I think that the recommendation that's put forward by staff is probably the best one. The reason for that is that we generally are pretty conservative in our approach when it comes to, well, just about everything, but particularly finances. This approach, I think, allows for the greatest amount of flexibility because if we are using it to replace lost revenue, then that's something that can be used in the future and even the present for anything that we wanted to. And so whether it's some of the things that have been mentioned up here at the dais or suggested through the presentation, that gives us that amount of flexibility. It also, I think, provides a certain amount of protection against changes, which are likely to be forthcoming just based on how they've characterized these particular regulations as interim final. I feel like sometimes I'm living in 1984 with some of the words that are put out by the government. So that, I think, is another protection that we have is by putting it into the offset of lost revenue. And then finally, our most volatile revenue source is our general fund. It's not generally going to be some of our segregated funds that we have, enterprise funds. So that it makes a lot of sense for me to kind of go in that particular direction. I certainly appreciate some of the suggestions that have been put forward by the government and by others. I do want to point out that there is I know that this is, directed towards equity, and I think it's important for us to remember there's a difference between equity and equality. When it comes to equity, it's a lot about identifying different classes of people and figuring out how whatever is identified as the lower economic class somehow can receive a benefit that the upper economic class does not, and that can create some confusion and tension that may be unnecessary. So I think, again, for our purposes, it's a better idea for us to focus on having these funds go towards lost revenue. So I appreciate the presentation. To the degree that provides direction, there it is.
Wong?
Yeah, I do want us to gauge the community because the funds is for the community, even though we are the stewards of it. And I know Mr. Segala came here, I don't know if it was the last meeting, he was also asking potentially for assistance. And I think that there may be those in the community who may have good ideas and or true needs that really serve our community. And so I forgot what when it was, it's the economic impacts one, where if there's no March 3rd date and it can be something shown, if we can do some type of survey and if you can reach the businesses or the sectors that are truly were hurt if there's a way or program we can assist above and beyond what we've done, because we have never been given funds to be able to assist our businesses, our nonprofits, or whatever, the sector, somehow gauge that and see if there's also something viable we can offer. I would also like to add and put that on the table, because I think that the backup, meaning what's proposed, is always something safe and valuable there, but if we engage the community, at least we'll know that, okay, they also like us to be good stewards and just keep it where we're protecting our lost revenue. But I would like to see that as well. So, meaning take care of our employees, see what the community also is going on. So that would be kind of hit a couple more of these 4 items.
My 2 cents is that what the staff's proposal is the way to do it. I mean, it puts it back in the general fund if we need it there. And I think staff will look around throughout our community, see where gaps, and our actual organization, the City of Clovis, and they recognize gaps. This is the vehicle, the way, the proposal that was given to us by staff is the vehicle that best addresses those gaps. And yes, some sectors in our community might need something, and if it meets some of the criteria that the government's asked us to consider, we'll consider them.
I agree with you. I think the risk of what you described, not knowing what the community might offer, but not tying it to these funds. Because in the last few weeks, twice in my day job, there's been this, oh, there's all this money, and people scurry around, and we have all kinds of needs. And then you get a thing like, oh, no, sorry, not that. So it actually causes more ill will than good. But I think there are 2 parallel things. What the community needs is important, and if we had a Citizens Academy or we did a strategic planning or anything that, anything we could hear from folks, that's one thing. The money is different. I would be hesitant right now to tie it to the money, because the answer mostly is going to be no. The needs just aren't going to fit, and really nothing after March 3rd, which is sort of an odd thing since we spent all the money in the previous year. I mean, we're grateful. So I think in my mind, what you're saying is 2 different things. I would not link it to, do you have any ideas to spend $17 million? Because the answer is 10 times over. And I will end up saying no more than yes, would be mine. So I want to concur with the comments here.
I agree that we need to go with staff's recommendation on this. It's the safest course of action. It gives us the most flexibility, and we can pivot at a later time with the budget if a housing project comes up and it looks like we can help it by waiving some of the fees, affordable housing, obviously. But it gives us more flexibility and also gives us a degree of a safety if they move the goalposts on us. We're not that far out ahead of it, and we'll be safe.
Do you have enough direction?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. We'll move on to, let's see.
So, I think the most prudent course is we know what our revenue losses were as of last December. We have to evaluate them again as of December, at the end of this year, when those numbers come in. So I think every year at budget time for the next few years, we'll be evaluating lost revenue. We could probably do it more often, maybe able to do it twice a year, where we come back to council and say, okay, so far we've lost this much revenue, to give us that idea that, okay, again, if the economy takes off and we aren't losing any revenue, then we have to go out and really actively start developing programs to spend this money elsewhere.
So it's not going to impact next fiscal year's budget. We're not going to have money that we are, or are we? Because I know that you didn't include the ARP funds in the budget for next fiscal year.
So right now, it would give us, if we roll this lost revenue in, we would have a bigger fund balance at the end of the year. Depending on how that's looking, as we track what's happening to our revenues, we may come back with a budget amendment.
I see. There's no need to include it in the next fiscal year budget, but if it happens that we put it into lost income, then we'll have that much more money at the end of the year, perhaps.
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to item 15, consider update and seek policy directions regarding emergency order 2014 and emergency order 2020-15, assisting restaurants and other businesses severely impacted by the COVID-19 crisis by allowing businesses the option of temporary expand capacity into public and private common areas under specified circumstances and potential for longer-term use. And Andy.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. So tonight we'll be doing a review of the emergency orders in relation to outdoor business operations. They were orders 2020-14 and 15. And believe it or not, these were implemented just about a year ago. In May of 2020, the state allowed businesses to reopen after the initial closures, but required many to operate outdoors only. The city initially responded with emergency order 2020-14 for restaurants, and shortly after added EO 2020-15 for all businesses under health order mandated capacity. Once it became known that other businesses were required to operate outdoors, we added it. This was done waiving many state and city codes to allow this to occur. And it was said to be a 3-week health order at the time, and here we are a year later, still underneath those same orders. And it was considered to be a very short-term solution, those emergency orders. Many businesses took advantage of these orders as they were critical in allowing the businesses to operate. Here's an example of a cycle bar here in town that was operating outdoors for many months over the summer. The city made some special efforts to help businesses that only had access to public space to expand into. And as a slow reopening has occurred recently, the use has diminished and many have been removed. So right now, we have about 19 of these operating throughout the city, and we have 1 in Old Town, as of my latest count. Here are some images of some of the other operations that were going on outdoors. On the left is a salon, and on the right is some of the public facilities we put in public spaces behind Bobby Salazar's in parking lot 1. So currently, under the statewide tier framework, businesses are still under capacity restrictions. I believe they're at 50% capacity as we are in the orange tier. And that allows businesses to continue to take advantage of the emergency orders that the council had adopted. It is expected the tier framework will be removed on June 15th. And staff has indicated to businesses that they would have 30 days to remove the outdoor uses once 100% capacity is allowed. There is a lot of ambiguity at this point on what happens on June 15th. The state has not been clear on that, so we are not sure if 100% capacity will be achieved on June 15th or not. Some businesses have found these spaces to be valuable, regardless of the capacity orders. So tonight we are seeking some policy direction. Would council like to allow outdoor use beyond the currency emergency orders? What would you like to have happen after June 15th or July 15th if those orders can go away? If you'd like them to go on, we have options to discuss on how we can make that work. And if not, we'll work with the business community, as we always have, to help them transition back to normal operations. I'm here for any questions or further conversation.
If I may. Thank you, Mayor. So if we do nothing, then the expectation is that the outdoor uses that we've seen that apparently 19 businesses are currently taking advantage of and 1 business in Old Town is taking advantage of, they would be required to just move in. So the kind of the do nothing scenario is that folks are going to be required to close those 19 outdoor operations and move them in. I'm presuming that's correct, is that right?
That's correct.
And then there have been some businesses, and only this one comes to mind. There's the local on Clovis Avenue, which has built some railing outside of the Clovis Avenue side of their restaurant. And I haven't been to the back side of the restaurant. I knew they had some outdoor dining there. But on the front part, they put in some permanent railing. I'm presuming that that is going to be allowed regardless of whether, we do nothing. So they'll be allowed to continue operating outdoors if we do nothing. Is that right?
Yeah, the owner of that property came in and got a permit for that improvement.
Okay.
And they're also allowed underneath a sidewalk dining permit that all businesses in Old Town are allowed to take advantage of going forward, regardless of pandemic or not.
Okay, say that last part again, please.
The sidewalk dining permit allows, or not just dining, but sidewalk business permit allows businesses in Old Town to utilize the public right-of-way for doing business.
As long as they stay on the sidewalk.
As long as they stay on the sidewalk and leave an ADA path of travel in that area. So like the old corner cafe spot,
Right.
for example,
Okay.
is utilizing that space. And you saw those spaces become really valuable during the pandemic, but it expanded further into the street as well for some restaurants during that time. That's the area we're talking about would need to come back.
And that could be a more permanent use as opposed to just a temporary use, to like a sidewalk sale kind of a use for a
Yeah, if you walk down Old Town, you'll see a variety of businesses using the sidewalks for displaying merchandise or having tables provided to them.
And is that something that we did as readily prior to the pandemic, or are we more restrictive in that?
No, that's standard practice for 20-plus years.
Okay, in Old Town only?
Yes.
Okay. And so can you give me an idea of what the other businesses are, besides the 559 in Old Town, what type of businesses they are, the other 18, I guess?
We have quite a few restaurants that are operating outdoors. For instance, most of them are on the Shaw Avenue corridor. IHOP, Huckleberry's, Seven, they're all operating outdoor patios, mostly in parking lots. Okay. Around town. We also have a few churches that are doing some things. I didn't include those in the 19, just for some situational awareness. Some churches, as well as some medical providers that have set up tents to expand space. So I didn't count those in the 19, but mostly restaurants.
All right. And there have been some restaurants, at least in Old Town, which had previously kind of had these parklets that they've operated in the parking space area, and then they withdrew those for whatever reason, and I'm thinking of the Chicos and Luna specifically. Have they indicated a desire to re-enter into that parking area, or has there been any discussion with them about that?
They have not indicated to us a desire to move back. They are happy to be back in their space.
All right. All right. Thank you.
Any other than 559, is anybody else using the public right-of-way, public roadway of the other 19?
No, not at this time.
Okay, thank you.
So, Andy, you said that regardless of the pandemic, any business can pay the fees, go through a permit process, and be on sidewalks, correct?
Yes. It's a very low cost. We need evidence of insurance, a few things, and evidence that their setup wouldn't impact ADA path of travel.
And that's citywide, any commercial center potential?
So they can operate in Old Town Clovis. We have a special program because it's public right-of-way that allows for that to happen. On private property, that's between the property owner and the business that's doing it.
So on private property, say Sierra Vista Mall, Colton's can continue to do that if that private owner allows it?
No, they're all kind of two separate issues. Okay. So in Old Town, we have the sidewalk permit. As long as you keep path of travel open, you've always been good to go. If you're in a private center and you want to set up an outdoor area that wasn't part of your initially approved site plan, development plans, that would need to, and say the pandemic never happened, you would need to come back to Planning and Development Services and seek approvals for that as the property owner, because it changes the circulation. Yeah. You have a lot of safety, ADA issues that need to be addressed, state mandates.
Okay.
But if they want to open up on, say, a sidewalk that's in the shopping center that doesn't impact ADA, that would be fine, but that's between the property owner and that business.
And does the staff have a recommendation, leaning, a feeling of where you want to go, or is that you really want us to weigh in, or has the business sector also sort of given you feedback so you kind of know, well, the majority does want us to go back to normal, or want us to ask the council to allow the ability to do this, continue this?
Yeah, in Old Town, I believe there were some comments provided to you on the dais that were sent in over the past week, as well as I believe the 559 owners are here that have provided comments on their views on this. And it does seem to be that Old Town is very concerned, and we have a strong priority of preserving parking and the flexibility of Old Town, the flexibility of the space to be used for festivals, farmers market, parking, as well as critical space for expansions during pandemics, apparently. That's become important. So, we would like to have that flexibility maintained in Old Town. In regards to private property, we have a process in place right now where if a private property owner wants to come in to basically convert a space into profitable space, they can come in and seek a permit for that, whether it's a site plan amendment or an administrative use permit. Okay. And we would encourage that, but not underneath the emergency standing. We would need to have it come in and comply with all state codes. There could be some transitionary time for that if one wants to stay, but most of what's out there would need to be significantly modified in order to comply with all state and city codes.
Okay. And if we went the route where we wanted more of this, we can also add in where whatever's being added is more aesthetically pleasing, where it's just not a cinder block wall. They have to really, really invest and make it match Old Town or match that business. We can do that, or is that something that we don't do? Is that something on the staff level?
So if you're doing a permanent improvement, Planning and Development Services reviews all those down to the materials, colors, how that blends. That's part of that process.
And that's we already have that.
It's all a standing process.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I guess my comments, I've said this before, if I were in charge, which I'm clearly not, but I would love, we've talked about this for a decade, but I think that parking lot 1 being into an outdoor plaza, I think our job is to imagine what will enhance Old Town Clovis as a destination of some sort, and maybe it's from April to October. I don't know, but I do feel like there are some interesting opportunities down there, and I think of all the work that Dwight did around parklets, as a kind of an interesting strategy in a place like Old Town. So I don't want to walk away from those longer-term ideas, but I do think that, I do think where Vaughn is going is right. They need some kind of standard. They need some kind of expectation. They need some, I think I talked to somebody during the campaign. One corner lot had campaign signs all over it. You would never allow that on a right-of-way otherwise. So I feel like there weren't any rules about how that all looks. So I feel like if the businesses find it supportive, now how to resolve the Old Town parking question is important, and that requires more thought. But we've talked about for a decade about making Old Town more of a destination, and if outside dining from April to October is one of the things, I'd love to find a way to do that. I don't know how, but I think it would be great if we could figure that out. And I know maybe some of the work, like, I don't know where we are in the development of that South of 5th idea and the Bullard corridor driving into Centennial Plaza. Now, it won't be super helpful for 559 or Lunas because it's on the other end of Old Town, but I think that's the idea, to make the more outside space as attractive as the general, overall ambiance of Old Town. So I'm kind of in the yes and category to see what we might end up with, I guess, as we talk about it. My 2 cents.
True. There's a specific business, I know the owners, BC's Pizza, and they have taken part of the lawn in front of their business on frontage on Shaw and put in some, I think, fairly nice wood and different barriers in there. After July 15th, they would be required to remove that if we didn't take action. Is that correct?
Yeah, as it stands now, yes.
Okay. I think we have businesses that really were on life support, and we don't know when this is we don't know that there's not gonna be a resurgence, and I think they need to have the opportunity to play catch up. And if they can take their business to 150% and make some money and maybe take care of some of the debts they incurred, that would be a good thing. I can't be real supportive of shutting people down, like that.
I think the pandemic's almost over. I think that California at least, and especially here in Clovis, we've probably reached what is called herd immunity or community immunity. And if people continue to get the vaccine, it's over. But it was devastating. 2020 was devastating. It was devastating, especially to restaurants and service-oriented businesses like bars and breweries and all those other types of businesses. And I don't think it's not unreasonable that if this pandemic took a year from them, that we in government cannot try to mitigate that devastation. And government doesn't do nuance very well, and this is very nuanced. And we got to, and that's a big ask from us to you, our kind of regulators, because it's almost going to be every single business is going to be a different case. You can't make a regulation to fit all. Like we used to tell the governor, you can't make a law or one of these emergency orders to fit the whole state. I don't think we can give you direction to fit every single business either. It's going to be very nuanced. What does the business need to get some kind of mitigation that was caused by a year where this thing shut them down? And so we need creativity, we need compassion, we need empathy, and so I think the emergency orders, as it pertains to these types of business, it has to go on. And creativity is what we have to do as the governing body of the city, and you as the regulators of our vision, because but it should, but we're Clovis too. I like what Lynn said in Vaughn said, we have standards. It can't be something ugly. And the businesses have to work with us. They have to understand that it's usually no from the government, and we're willing to work with them. We in Clovis, we are nuanced, and we will be reasonable, but they got to be reasonable back. And so, that's the best I can say. I've been with it. My parents had a restaurant. I'm glad they didn't have to live through this. But I know what I would want them to have had if this ever happened to them. It was just compassion from those that govern and regulate what goes on in their business.
So based on what I'm hearing, I've got a few ideas to talk through and bounce off of you. I'm hearing that there's a desire to allow restaurants, it sounds like restaurants mostly, but I would just argue that any business that could be impacted should have access to the outdoor spaces around them to mitigate COVID-19 economic impacts going forward for some period of time. With that, we could do a special permit process for the Old Town area that would allow restaurants to use public spaces similar to our special events process. And what that process would do is allow a restaurant to take over the parking spaces adjacent to their business, meeting some more codes and requirements than we did during the emergency orders, such as meeting ADA requirements and other things. That would go through a truncated application process, and then the adjoining neighbors would also be noticed, and then council would weigh in on that as approving of that street closure essentially as part of the special events process. And that would be for Old Town specifically. On the private business side, we could alter the language. I have worked with the city attorney's office on the emergency order to basically allow a business to continue operating until they have the opportunity to submit an application for the land use approvals needed to allow their continued operation outdoors for potentially the long term and have it be developed correctly. The current emergency order would stay in place through basically I'll just call it the July 15th date. That could move based on what that looks like. It could be further out than that if occupancies are still limited going forward. But we would have a process in place where businesses would have time to transition to a more permanent type of structure. Say they found value in that outdoor patio, as has been described. We could assist them through that process and not just come out and say, take it down. There would be a process for them to go through to make permanent improvements to create more value for them. And in Old Town, allow a special events process for restaurants to operate outdoors in public spaces such as the streets if they desired. I would recommend a limit on the number of evenings or days that a business could operate in the outdoor spaces in Old Town.
And even hours of operations.
We could limit it, correct. We could limit it on several fronts, and that would go through all the departments for comments and come back to council for consideration in a public forum. So those are some of the ideas I have. Does that seem to fit the
Here's my
desire?
My thought. I kind of agree with Lynn that if we were to take this, extend the emergency order through October 15th for this purpose, and not put a burden on businesses to have to come and fill out all the forms and go through all the planning process for private property. For public property, I would actually like to hear from the 559 folks on having just maybe Thursday, Friday, Saturday use of those spaces, and then they have to be removed, either a close of business on Saturday night or first thing in the morning on Sunday. I don't know what kind of burden that would be, but I think it for a public street use, that would be, I would think, would hit their peak time. I'm imagining, and we've had conversations. But I don't want to put any burden on businesses to have to come and fill out forms and pay fees to the city of Clovis when they've taken the hits they've taken. At least then October 16th, it goes away and we reevaluate. That's my thought.
I think something like, I think that we need to set the standard for parklet use. I don't know, whatever we call it, but I mean, what are those standards? And if people can meet them, and I'm not saying outrageous, and I do think there's some basic parameters that we can provide, and then I think we just work with that. Now, it seems like, and to the 559, there's something else happening in Old Town around that, so there's a different question about that, but I think the standards about what's it look like, signage, lighting, access, following other ABC codes or any other ordinances of the city, whatever all that is, that's all part of the agreement. But yeah, I think October 15th makes sense, and then we can take a look and have the winter to figure it out. But I agree, it seems like folks like the BC Pizza, or any of these folks really, for whatever they lost at 20, if a little more space or a little more reason to be attracted to the restaurant is available, I mean, I feel like that's what the least we can do at this point. Until you can make parking lot one a super cool outdoor plaza. Did I say that before? Just kidding.
And yeah, with regards to Old Town, because it has those special events, just work that out and make that very clear as well, meaning what takes precedent. If it's Friday night, it's farmer's market. Does the permit take precedent over the farmer's market, or does the farmer's market take precedent, so that way it can happen? And during functions like Big Hat Days, and that's going to come up. So I think that needs to be very clear also, especially in Old Town.
So based on the council approval of street closures for special events like farmers market and Big Hat, et cetera, that event organizer has and basically owns that property from curb to curb during those events, and it's their right to that space.
Like if Boot requests a street closure for 5 PM to 10 PM, Boot really is the ultimate decision maker on that street use
Yes,
during that special event.
yes. As we have it set up now.
Yeah.
And Boot could, if 559 wanted to use that spot, Boot could ask for some type of remuneration for that.
Sure.
And that would be within their right because of the process.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you. But other than when they have street closures, that would be frankly, between a business and the city itself.
Correct.
Okay.
My only comment on that is I feel like we're gonna put Boot and a business owner into a conflict in about 10 seconds. If Boot says, no, I don't like you, I wish your streets were blue, I don't drink beer, I think it should be coffee, I just feel like that's gonna set up citizens arguing with each other. So I'm not sure if that's probably gonna make a lot of sense in the long haul. I think we're gonna have to think that through, because it still belongs to us. The street still belongs to us. I think the city's gonna have to have some mediation role in there, because I don't wanna put two business owners, basically, in an argument about who's gonna say no, and then what's the appeal process? If Boot were to decide, nope, I don't like pizza, it should only be Mexican food that can eat outside, what's the appeal? So that probably needs a little work. That could be at risk at some point.
I concur that what we've done forever are those official street closures, and they should take precedent. We've said, they've already come to us, it's been an official public hearing, we've already said they basically have the right to use those streets. And therefore, it's not like we're having parties, we have those kind of festivals every day, right, or every weekend. It's just, we can count how many of those occur. And so there shouldn't be any conflict that is unresolvable. They have control of those streets because they've already come to us during, and we've already settled that here. But that would be no.
But the reoccurring one is the Friday night farmers market,
And that's
every Friday night.
right, Friday night. From a certain time, from a certain
four
season,
to
right?
9. It starts in spring and goes through fall.
Right. There's a season for that. It's not year long.
Correct.
So those are just, I mean, we couldn't have anticipated a pandemic either, so
Yeah.
not even Dr. Fauci.
Yeah, 3 weeks it was supposed to be. 3 weeks.
I'll open it to the public at this time. Anyone here in the chamber willing to comment on this item?
I guess we don't need to introduce ourselves. Anyhow, no, thank you for taking this up. Andy, thank you for calling and working with us on this. Appreciate all the comments. Couple of things I'll tell you. With Boot, we were able to work out that we are paying the fees for 2 spaces every Friday night in those. It was glad that we were able to work that out. Up to Lynn's point, it was rules du jour with Boot daily until we got that worked out, so I think we're good there. To Drew, taking the infrastructure in and out constantly is a lot of labor.
A lot of labor, and I'm not that big, and
Yeah.
it's hard to move that stuff.
Yeah.
It's really hard.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
I think the issue could potentially be, we don't have an objection to doing that, but the problem is the additional labor, the additional time to come in and to do it at the end of the evening, and then when you get there to go set it up, and the parking is full. That would be more the conflict with whoever's vehicle is there, right? And just for the record, we're using 2 parking spaces out front there, but it has provided a significant improvement in revenue for running 2 months now. So I appreciate you guys all bringing up what happened in 2020, the impact of that. We've so far had 2 positive months, to the tune of about 146% improvement month to month. So I'm an advocate for it. We worked with Dwight for a lot of years on the parklet. Every time he did it, we would participate and put one in there. I think the parklets are a great idea. You'll see that happening in San Luis Obispo now permanently. You'll see that San Diego, San Francisco, Davis, Visalia is working on those as well. So I think it's very progressive of Clovis to consider doing something like that. And the idea of the sidewalk permit, yes, we have one of those. Thank you, Sean, for helping us work on that. I had no idea that sidewalk permits had been available for 20 years. We found out 2 years ago. That's great. There is a little bit of space there. There's not as much as, you know, you'd always want more, right? But for us, we can only use the Pulaski side because ABC law, we have to have line of sight of the patrons, right? We probably couldn't use Fourth because there's not enough windows or line of sight or shrubbery in the way and things like that, but that's a possibility.
We've also created a wonderful venue and a place that people want to come to Old Town Clovis instead of the Tower District or downtown. We have the music and people sit outside and they have so much fun listening to the music and enjoying Old Town. I constantly get all the time, this is an amazing town. This is so cute here. I had no idea. I would not have known if you guys didn't have this out here. So we're bringing value to Old Town Clovis. And it's just not the 559. They go and have cupcakes across the street, or they go down and have coffee. And they had no idea all these things existed in Old Town Clovis. And we're bringing a venue to Old Town Clovis, a destination.
Yeah. And good or bad for PD, I believe we're attracting people into Old Town that would have never come before. So sorry for that, but we haven't had any problems that I know of in that regard. But I think it's positive, the amount of people that we've had coming for first time, and then they repeat visit because they saw something different, and then they learn that there's a farmer's market, so they'll come back to that, or there's a car show or an antique show or something like that. So, yeah, I think it's a good vibe for Clovis at this point. Can I answer any other questions?
And right now we have it set up like it looks like Old Town Clovis. We have corrals and we have barrels out there, so it's not junky. It looks nice. It fits the vibe.
Actually, Mr. Williams, I do have a question.
Sure.
You have an area on the north side of your building. Would it be possible for you on Sunday through Wednesday night to utilize that area with your barrels and corrals?
We could probably use
and then on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, or some variation thereof, this way, business owners downtown don't lose that space. Is that doable?
On the north side is an ADA ramp for entrance into the building, which takes up 50% of that width. And I believe it's right. I'd have to go check, but I believe it's right on the property line of the other building. So I mean, it's possible we could look into it.
Because I know that some of the businesses, I've had conversations with a couple of folks, they have a little bit of heartburn about it being there all the time. I don't know that they'd have heartburn if it was only there Thursday, Friday, and Saturday night.
Understood, yeah.
So if that's something you could do, I mean, that would be, I think, a win-win for everybody.
It's really hard to move.
Yeah, understood.
That's why you have to hire people. Big people, and use machines if you have to.
And I want to address too, the parking in downtown in Old Town. It's the business owners. They park out front instead of parking in the back.
Right.
They utilize the parking that the customers would be using as well.
We actually have been doing a survey of which business owners park right in front of their office, right in front of their retail building, just in case it ever came up.
That'll make you popular, just so you know.
Yeah.
This has been an issue as old as time.
I was just going to say, you can count on a few things in life, whatever they are. This is the third one, because honestly, this has been the problem from the very beginning.
It was people parking their horses out front 100 years ago.
Yeah, understood. No, that makes sense. Yeah, we can look into that. It's not a lot of space there, but it might relieve a portion of it or something. But I know we do have to keep that ADA ramp There's 3 ramps to the building. On there's one on the other side and one in the back. So, no, thanks for the question.
I had a question, Max. Yeah, if I could. So every time I've had the opportunity to go to 559, I really enjoyed it. I like the corral, I like the beer, I like your burger. I think it's one of the best. I don't know if you've had the opportunity to review some of the correspondence we received, but there's at least 3 letters that have been provided to the Clovis City Council, and they're in opposition to 559 continuing to have their corral in front. The reasons behind it are not particularly clear, but there does appear to be a conflict there, and it sounds like you guys are resolving it, but I wanted you to at least be able to, if you wanted to, address what these concerns were, but because you haven't had an opportunity to review them.
Yeah, I haven't seen those.
Haven't seen them.
Okay,
Yeah.
so.
I'm always open to that.
Okay, so the boot is the venue for working out some conflicts that may exist between business owners. And it sounds as though that you have either agreed to or have already paid for the Friday night.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
And they address some issues related to an incident in the past related to ABC and beer kind of being consumed away from your building, but was received at your building. And I don't know anything about those facts or if they're facts at all. But I guess I bring it up just to kind of let you know that there's a tension there that it would really be great if it can be relieved. I don't know how best to do that, but communication is a good start, and both sides asking for a little forgiveness on anything that might have been said or done in what was a very tense year. Might be a step in the right direction. I don't know who needs to apologize first, or if you both need to apologize at the first time, but I was really surprised to hear and then read some of these things that were put forward, because I really enjoy what it is you guys have done at that particular location. So I just wanted you to be aware of that, and the assurances that you've worked with Boot in order to work out that farmers market issue.
Yes, yeah, we've already paid, it's been 3 Fridays so far? Yes.
Okay.
We've sent those in like clockwork right after Friday, so they have the funds, the checks are in their possession at this point.
Okay, all right, great.
That was the compromise that we worked out with them.
And then another compromise was, we've always had music in the past, all these other farmers markets the past years, we've all had music. And then this year they said, you can't have the music. So I worked out a compromise with them that we wouldn't start our music until 8:15, 8:20, when farmers market was over.
I see.
That was the other compromise.
So there'd be no battle of the bands in the,
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Though I think that could be an attraction.
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
I don't know what else.
But that was another compromise that we worked out, that
All right.
our music would start after their music. At the beginning, they weren't gonna have any music.
Right.
When we checked with them back in March, and we started talking to them in March and April and saying, what are we doing? Because we weren't having meetings, right? We would have some virtual meetings like everybody else.
Yeah.
And they said, no, we're not gonna have any music. We don't know when we're gonna have it. And came right up to the 11th hour, we decided we're gonna have a DJ out there. So we said, all right, well, we'll take ours and start ours later, like at 8:30.
Okay.
When is yours gonna play? I forgot what time they said it's gonna play. 5 to 8:30 or, yeah, 5:30 to 8:30.
Okay.
So that way ours goes afterwards. And then that way it leaves a little bit of a vibe for people that are still in the streets to say, hey, we can go over here and continue listening to music and.
Right. All right, great. Appreciate that.
Maybe eating a burger or something.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sounds good. Yeah, thanks for the comments.
Thank you, I really appreciate it.
Anyone else in the public? Anyone on the web?
No.
And we've got the correspondence.
Correct.
Okay. So, do you have?
So if I may summarize, I think I heard, and then make sure we're going the right direction here. So I think I have concurrence on extending the emergency orders that we referred to tonight until October 15th. That would allow businesses time to continue their operations as they are today through that date. It's important for us to manage the dual use of Old Town, such as was just discussed. and that the event that has reserved the streets through the council process would take precedence, but we strongly encourage cooperation to allow those things to concur. We would not be doing any event permitting underneath that scenario, and we would encourage businesses that aren't using their spaces that can be removed in business days that they're closed to do so to free up parking in Old Town specifically during that time.
I just want to emphasize, if I may, what Vong referred to is we learned that property rights are just kind of a bundle of rights, and they can be, picked off. A certain amount of property rights can go to one person, another person, and there can be mutual interest in one particular property. And so we did talk a little bit about the city owns the parking spaces. We have given basically some stewardship responsibilities to boot. And at the same time, it feels like we also gave some stewardship responsibilities, or at least opened up to some retail and restaurants in Old Town the ability to use the same area that we kind of already said, boot can utilize. So I just really want to be legally very clear on which right has precedent. And I don't know if that would be you, David, or Scott, that could work that through in a way that at least we're comfortable with, because we do get questions about it, and we want to be able to at least point to either a legal memorandum or some case or something that will say it has already been worked through. And then taking Old Town away from the conversation just a little bit, there are private property owners who have rights, and sometimes those rights are more like a condominium type of right, and sometimes that belongs really not to the one who is the one renting it, but the one who owns that property. And so there's a potential conflict there. I mean, maybe we've stepped into an area that we really had no legal right to step into when areas have decided to take on like BC's Pizza. It sounds like they've got a really good thing going there, and maybe 5 does as well. But I want to make sure that we're not stepping on anybody else's property interests in that respect as well. So, David, I think you maybe wanted to comment on some who has precedent.
No, on Old Town, it's pretty easy. The city can dictate who has that precedent, and so we can manage that through the process. So it's not going to be an issue, just a matter of figuring it out. Right now, the way it's set up is, as Andy presented it, is the Old Town event sponsor kind of controls those streets. But we can work on that. We could tweak that if we wanted to when we do the approval. So, but I'll talk with Andy, make sure that's all done. But it's the law's pretty clear on that one. And private property, as long as, they can make their decisions, and that's the landlord and tenant responsibilities. I think you captured that, and we don't want to interfere with that, but we're just allowing them to work out that arrangement is really what we're doing.
I see. So, for example, a landlord can say, boy, it would really be great if you actually went out into the grass or into the parking lot or into the sidewalk, but I'm sorry, the city won't allow that. Our role has just been saying, well, if you want to allow it, we're saying it's okay, at least up through October 15th?
That's correct.
That's correct.
All right. Thank you. I appreciate your clarification, Andy.
And
if you have more to say.
And then kind of the last piece, and this is maybe more for a note for myself, but is to market and work with the commercial property owners on private property that would like to expand their businesses where feasible to come back to our Development and Planning Services Department for processing and working through those issues so that there's more value to be created. We're all about that going forward.
And we want to make sure it's aesthetically pleasing. I think that was another comment that we had, right? And I don't know if that means the corral. I mean, I'm going to use the corral. The corral needs to have more of a parklet feel, so like a level ramp, which we've seen in some of the other areas, a board that goes from the curb to the parking area. I don't know what that looks like, but we want it to be aesthetically pleasing. And I don't know how one determines that, because, what I think looks great may not be what everybody else thinks looks great.
That's true. Just kidding. I just wanted to chime in. I guess 2 things. One is the folks from the 559, you should read the letters. They're public comments, so you should. But a couple of them refer to handicap parking. So maybe one of the considerations is trying to protect a handicap parking space. I'm not quite sure how that falls in front of your store. Obviously, there must be at least one. Anyway, so there's that. But I do think our goal should be kind of like our tiny home project. Clovis can set the standard for parklets. We're smarter than any of those other cities that you said. So, I mean, I think we should strive to have something that is super awesome, that's 6 months out every year. It's a reason to come to Clovis because the parklets give this interesting new added dimension to whatever the business or restaurant might be. So I think that's really for me, it's sort of an aspirational goal to think about what that looks like, and I think you get to the aesthetics a little bit in there.
So I'm hearing some near-term goals regarding the emergency order, October 15th, making this work, and the long-term goals would be private property, administrative use permits, and then Old Town, some type of program that could be the parklet program.
Yeah, that people would be excited, like every year in April, the parklets came back, and wouldn't that be cool, because you could take a slice of pizza or a hamburger and eat it outside, like that. I think something like that says we're, you know, you just said it, our job is to add value to the businesses, not to make it more difficult. So I think if there's a way that this helps some businesses, I think we should figure that out. Anyway.
Nuance.
Yeah.
Nuance.
Discretion.
So, just to be clear, this is only for Old Town. So any other public right-of-way, they don't have the ability, or is this citywide where if they want to go into a public right-of-way, they can? So I just want to make sure that we're carving an exception just for this area. So that way there's no other public right-of-way someplace we haven't thought about, and someone goes, hey, you gave it to Old Town, what about us over here?
Yeah. So really it only applies to Old Town because of how the buildings are situated related to the public property. Okay. The buildings are property line to property line. However, just for clarity, we do offer lease space along the trail in various parts of town that businesses do utilize. Some of the restaurants up there on the north end of town utilize it for outdoor eating areas as well. But that's also a program that has been long-standing and going forward.
So Prime 13, or 13 Prime.
Perfect example.
So they're finally out on that patio, which we've been wanting restaurants to be doing all along, even conceptually when we converted that to a trail. They are finally taking advantage of it. It has always been available to them, and it made sense during this last year to do it.
Yep. And my other point is, I just want to be clear that it is not an extension of the emergency order itself. I just want it so that way it's specific to this, and if the emergency order ends next week, we should vote for it to end. This still goes on, so just those distinctions. I don't want the public to think, oh, the emergency order is going all the way to October 15th. The emergency order as in, like, we're still in a state of emergency.
It could be amended, or...
And so, however, I want those two to be...
Yeah. There's two things going on here. There's the emergency declaration, and that's what the city is under. And underneath that, kind of there's these layers of emergency orders that address certain issues. There's two emergency orders that address the outdoor business use, 14 and 15. Those can be amended to be consistent with council's direction tonight that our city attorney's office can come back with.
Technically, the emergency orders, these two emergency orders, don't go away by themselves on their face until the city lists its own emergency order.
Okay.
Now, but there's enough flexibility in there for the Community and Economic Development Director to extend that to October 15th and to make any changes that the council gave direction tonight. I believe there's enough authority in there now that he can do whatever needs to be done based on the council direction.
Okay, excellent. I just wanted to...
Well, that's a first. I can do whatever I want.
Okay, so...
Or it was just policy direction. Did you get what you needed?
Yeah, just direction at this point, and if we needed to come back, we will. Mm-hmm.
And that's...
Thank you.
I'm lost. That was the end? Yeah, Yep. Next item, city manager comments.
I've got nothing. I've talked enough tonight.
Okay, council comments. Vaughn?
I went to the RAN ID board meeting, and so the only thing decided there at the end was, I think it's all going to go to Zoom now, then. So just wanted to give you a heads up.
How long was that meeting? 24 minutes.
Yeah, it was really quick, so it was... Okay. And we attended the Butterfly Gardens, and I thought that was a very good event. So thanks for inviting us. Great job on that, Chad, Andy.
Bob?
I have nothing.
Drew?
Yeah, I just want to, real quickly, some of the comments that were made during public comments that were sent to us, encouraging us to become more involved in affordable housing. It seems that some folks are, I think maybe they're a little confused of what the role of local government in this is. And and some of the comments, quite frankly, are a little upsetting, being the fact that the city of Clovis has assisted Habitat for Humanity in building 25 low-income houses in this community. We spent, I want to say, almost $1 million in fee waivers for Solvita Commons, which will be opening this summer in a cooperative effort with the Fresno Housing Authority. And the mayor was at the groundbreaking for 75 units of affordable housing in Clovis for homeless people and people coming into transition. We've done rental assistance for people in need. I think what people probably don't always understand is if the city of Clovis or any government entity decides that they're going to be the lead role in affordable housing, it changes the entire scenario of cost. It becomes a very costly item, and especially with the 200% increase in the cost of lumber, prevailing wage jobs and affordable housing become almost prohibitive to the point where you can't use the words affordable and housing in the same sentence in that scenario. So while I appreciate the comments and the concern, I think that I would hope some of these folks would maybe educate themselves a little bit more on what the law is and what our role is, because I think it's a little unfair. That's all I have.
Lynn?
Just on the Butterfly Gardens, yes, great job, staff. Joe, you did a really nice job in your remarks. I do think we have an opportunity to figure out a way to engage with neighbors in projects like this that are by right, that have no public process at all. So when I was walking to my car up Holland, I stopped and talked to a few folks along the way, and they were very, we wish we'd been invited, we wish we'd known it was this morning, we wish we knew what was going in. So I do think that we're going to have to figure out a notification strategy or a communication strategy like we do with any other development. But if there's no hearing here, or there's no hearing at the Planning Commission, right, with Butterfly Gardens, I think it's not fair for neighbors to just wonder what it is, because then they had lots of suspicion. It's going to be this, and so we had really good conversations up Holland. But I'd like you all to think about what is that. Do we ask the developer Upholdings in this case to allocate funds to do a mailing? Can we do some communication? I just think we missed a chance to engage that neighborhood early. I don't know how to do it, but this isn't the last project like this that we're going to have. So I'd love to think about a way to communicate this when we're not required by law, but it's the right thing to do. And I don't know if there's something we have that we had a one sheet that we could, I'll take it back to this nice individual and he can pass. I think we just need to circle back to them. But I thought it was really sweet. One person said, how come we didn't get invited? And then I felt bad. And then I said, wait, the planning director, there she goes right there. And she drove up just like that and left me standing. It was really hot, but it's okay. Just kidding. So anyway, I think we have a chance to think about a way to do that, because it's not quite right that they don't have any information at all. I don't know how to do it, but figure it out. So we think of a way and maybe circle back and tell me what that might be. Thanks. But if you can get me a one sheet on Butterfly Gardens, I will take it back to the neighbors. If there's such a thing, or a fact sheet, or I don't know what, but I think they would be appreciative of that. Thanks.
And that was a great experience, Butterfly Gardens. There was two locals that spoke to me and asked what was going to happen, and after explaining it, they loved it. They just loved it. They couldn't wait for it to come back. And the comment was better than a vacant lot. And I concur with Councilmember Bessinger. I think many don't understand the nuances of affordable housing in California and the dichotomy involved. I mean, the state of California wants affordable housing. The city of Clovis wants affordable housing. That's one of my pet peeves. Unfortunately, the people in Sacramento don't give local governments the tools for it to happen in cities like ours. And the few tools that we once had were taken away. Redevelopment is one that comes to mind, and I remember once upon a time we built whole neighborhoods with that kind of funding, and now we can't build anything. We have prevailing wage. We have so many regulations that after a while, to build something, if we, the city, build something, it's astronomical. It makes no sense. There's no developer, no matter how much land is available or zoned for that type of building, will ever build it in our city. And then when we apply for those grants, they say that we don't meet the demographics for it. So, you know, we are never competitive as compared to other cities. So it's great that organizations like Upholdings and Self-Help were able to team together and get the funding that they were able to receive and build these 75 units, because if it were up to us, they don't give us the money. And other cities have better luck receiving that money. Maybe one day we get blamed for not receiving that money. Well, they don't give us the money. And one day they might. And so we try. And I appreciate the work that our staff does, that we actually do try. And until the government changes their opinion of who we are and and others change their opinion of who we are, hopefully things will change here as far as affordable housing. And so that ends our meeting, our regular meeting. Now we have a closed session item, and the way we're going to work this out is that the council is going to go to the lobby of the City Hall to discuss that item. So things will stay open here. It is the council that will move over to City Hall.
Mayor and members of council, if I can make a brief announcement for closed
Yes.
session. Just to clarify, we're going to closed session as identified on the agenda. There may or may not be something to report out when we come out of closed session. Now's the time to open the item for public comment before we go into closed session. I will note the city clerk did receive, looks like 5 comment letters that are related to the closed session. And I just wanted to point that out. He labeled them as item 16, and I think they do relate to that item. But please open it for public comment, and then we'll be ready to go into closed session.
Okay, I'll open up to public comment. Anyone in the chamber here wishing to comment on this closed session item? Anyone on the web?
No.
And we got this correspondence, do you think that was
correct?
It does relate to the housing element litigation, which is what the closed session is, and I think the city clerk labeled it as that, so.
Okay.
So we're going to City Hall?
So are we back on? Okay, we just had a closed session, and during the closed session, we had a conference with legal counsel regarding existing litigation on the case involving Desiree Martinez versus the city council. The council took action on this item, and we had a motion by Councilmember Whalen, second by Councilmember, or Mayor Pro Tem Ashbeck, and the motion was to appeal the court's decision on this case, Desiree Martinez versus City of Clovis, and the motion again was to appeal the decision of the court. This involves the arena overlay and the way the city is using this as a tool in order for us to have more affordable housing in our jurisdiction. Although we appreciate the court saying that we're not discriminating here in Clovis, but we need this tool. We need this tool to use the overlay tool to find land in our city, and it's been effective. Just last week, we used this tool to allow self-help industries and upholdings to build a 75-unit affordable housing project at Holland and Willow, Butterfly Gardens. And that's the type of projects that we need here in Clovis. And without this overlay, it wouldn't happen. And they're trying to deny that. So, no, we need to appeal it, and that's what the council has voted for, and it was a 5-0 vote for the appeal. So thank you, and that's the last item in our meeting tonight. So that concludes our meeting for tonight. We're adjourned.